Hi, everyone. Mimi Rocah here for Talking Feds. Want to talk to you today about the verdict and acquittal in the Sean Combs trial that happened actually last Wednesday, so a week ago. But I think it's still really important to talk about it. You probably heard what the outcome was. In fact, what you probably heard was that there was an acquittal on the most significant charges, because that was sort of the headline. And that is true. He was acquitted by a jury of the racketeering charges and the substantive sex trafficking charges. However, he was convicted of 2 counts of essentially interstate travel, causing interstate travel for purposes of illegal sexual conduct, which is prostitution. So what I wanted to focus on is kind of the reaction to the outcome of the trial, because I think it's really telling and important for what it says about where we are, frankly, as a society when it comes to victims and sex trafficking and understanding a real mindset of a victim. And that's far bigger than any single trial. The reaction by commentators, legal and otherwise, has largely been, oh, see, we knew this would happen. We knew there would be acquittals. The case was overcharged. The prosecutors were too aggressive in the way that they charged it. They shouldn't have charged a racketeering enterprise. It wasn't really there. Even charging this as sex trafficking was aggressive because this was really more of interpersonal disputes. And that is the defense that the defense attorneys, the defense team adopted largely. Very successfully and very skillfully. And nothing I'm saying is a commentary on the defense. I think the defense did exactly what they are supposed to do, which is provide the best defense possible under the facts and circumstances for their client. But here, given the fact that there were videos of Combs literally beating Cassie Ventura, the main victim, right? I mean, we see a video of them in the hotel. I believe it was 2016 surveillance camera. We have testimony from a security guard. There's no question, and they did not contest, nor could they, that he was physically abusive to her, not just on that occasion, but over time. But essentially, the defense was, yeah, but that's separate from the sexual encounters that she participated in. Those were voluntary. She wanted to participate in those, all of them. And her testimony that, no, I participated in them because I felt like I had to, and I was scared of the continuing abuse, and I was scared of the threats about my career, and I was scared about him exposing me having participated in these degrading and embarrassing episodes. That was argued against by the defense, and it was rejected by the jury. The jury did not accept that, or they would have found him guilty. And so again, I'm not so much questioning the jury's verdict. The jury is entitled to find what it finds. What is still very surprising to me is that in this day and age, when I thought we had come so far into understanding abuse and the impact that it has on victims, that over time it degrades victims, it wears down their will, that it shouldn't come down to, in this particular episode, was she told, you must have sex with this person and do XYZ or else I will beat you? No, that's not how it works. That's not how sex trafficking works. That's not how coercion works. That's not even how physical abuse leading to coercion works. But that is really what the defense was. And again, they did it very skillfully, as they are entitled to do. And the jury bought that. And what that says to me, big picture, and the commentators are all kind of buying into it, of this should never have been charged as sex trafficking. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. The right way to look at this, and I'm not going to get too much into the facts. There's another victim here, Jane, and there are examples of actually where that day in the hotel, let me just digress for a second, where she is seen clearly being beaten. She testified, and there was other corroborating evidence, that she was fleeing one of these freak-offs, one of those sexual encounters that she says she really was coerced into participating in. So there is that direct connection, but I don't think that is what is necessary. What is necessary is showing this pattern of abuse over time. And what it tells me is that I thought we had gotten to a place where we really understood more from a victim-centered point of view, we as a society, based on the Me Too cases, the idea that, these things take time for the victims to even be able to acknowledge what is happening to them. It doesn't happen instantly where you say, hey, I'm being coerced, or hey, I'm being forced into a situation. Or even that sometimes you may consent. Maybe the victim did consent on 1 or 2 times, right? There were text messages indicating that there was consent. She said, Cassie Ventura said, I was just saying that to appease him. Maybe she really was consenting. Just because you consent on 1 or 2 occasions doesn't mean you can't not consent on other times. That's our understanding of saying no, saying I don't consent, and what consent means. We supposedly have evolved in all of this over decades. And what the defense was able to successfully argue here makes me see, and a lot of victim advocates see, that actually we have so much farther to go. And I do not blame the prosecutors, though, in the way that this sort of, I think, easy commentary is. It's not that the charges should have been brought. In fact, I and many victim advocates that I know, the victim advocate community, views this prosecution as heroic for having been brought. Was it aggressive? Yes. But you know what? Sometimes aggressive prosecutions are appropriate. It was within the law. It had been done before. The facts were there. It had been done successfully before against more than one defendant, R. Kelly, another defendant in the Eastern District of New York. But the point is that sometimes you have to push the envelope, particularly when we're talking about areas of the law that are so rooted in archaic assumptions like women, sex, consent, control, coercion, sex trafficking, and the image of sex trafficking as people being brought in from different countries on planes, on trucks, and, held as prisoners in people's homes, etc. Of course that exists, but most sex trafficking, my experience as a federal prosecutor of over 17 years overseeing so many of these cases, and the other prosecutors and agents that I know, most sex trafficking actually occurs between people who have some relationship to each other. It may not be boyfriend, girlfriend. It may be. It can even be that you're married. Does that mean that you consent to everything? Does that mean that you cannot prove coercion? No. And you actually need to use the law in a way to push those boundaries forward, or those old stereotypes are never going to be broken. So rather than criticizing the prosecutors for bringing this case, I and many victim advocates, and I think a lot of federal agents and other prosecutors, I'm not speaking for all of them, but I just want to bring in this alternative view that is very victim-centered that says, thank you for bringing this. And not only did they bring it, but they did convict him of 2 federal felonies. That is not nothing, especially when you are talking about someone as famous as Sean Combs. It is actually, I think, harder to convict people who are celebrities. I had some of these cases myself. I think subconsciously probably, or maybe consciously, juries kind of hold them to almost a lower standard, or they hold them on a bit of a pedestal and say, the government really needs to prove more. I'm not saying that's conscious. I don't even know that happened here, because we don't know what happened in the jury room. And that's a good thing. What we do know is that the defense was able to successfully argue defenses that, frankly, I would have thought would have been rejected as outdated by now, as not understanding a victim's mindset. And the fact that it wasn't, and again, good job to the defense for doing it. That's their job. They did it well. And not really even faulting the jury. What it tells me is we as a society have so much further to go in understanding victims and understanding how sex trafficking and coercion and control work. And that's going to be the job of victim advocates and the job of prosecutors like these brave ones who fought on behalf of people who they really believed were victims and still believe, and did get some justice for them. And we will see what happens with the sentencing. And I'm sure I'll be updating you after that. I do want to note that the judge did not grant bail to Combs, even after this split, verdict, which tells me as an observer that the judge did see, who sat there and listened to the trial every day as well, that he sees Combs as a physical threat to these victims still. And that's important. So I hope that you learned something new from this discussion, a different perspective on the outcome of the case. And signing off now. Thanks so much for listening. Mimi Rocah for Talking Feds.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.